9, how can I assist you? Hello? Hello? Hello, you dialed into the 911 system. How can I assist you? Hello?
Yeah.
Do you need the police?
Yeah.
Where?
That's good.
Where? Who's there with you? Hello? What's going on?
Well, there's somebody asked me.
What?
Somebody asked me.
Rex Heuermann. I'm an architect. I'm an architectural consultant. I'm a troubleshooter. Born and raised on Long Island. Okay. Been working in Manhattan since 1987.
That 911 call was made by 24-year-old Shannan Gilbert, who was last seen in this gated community of Oak Beach, Long Island, New York. And that launched a missing persons investigation. And while it took a year to find Shannan's remains, actually very close to where she was last seen, in a marshy area, and police believe that she drowned by herself, by mistake. I mean, this case is baffling already, but it took a year to find her remains. And while they were searching for Shannan, police happened to stumble upon 10 sets of other human remains. Like, how crazy is that? And it started with the discovery of the remains of 4 victims found within a quarter mile of each other in this area called Gilgo Beach. So I'm sure you've heard of the Gilgo Four or the Gilgo Beach murders, things like that. And so, initially, investigators thought, well, this would be the work of a serial killer. But then they found more remains. Asian male who's still unidentified, sadly. Jessica Taylor, Valerie Mack, Baby Doe, Peaches, and so it went on. Sandra Costilla, and everybody wondered, would this be multiple serial killers operating in the same area? Would it be one? And they wondered that because here in this Maniville area, there was a convicted killer now, John Bitrolf, that was charged with 2 murders. And so they wondered if he would be responsible for the other murders in this area. Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, and obviously Sandra Costilla, not too far away. That was a plausible speculation. However, they never found evidence to connect John Bitrolf to those murders. And what made it interesting is that the Gilgo Four, these victims' remains were found bound and wrapped in burlap. And the others were found differently. For example, dismembered. Like Jessica Taylor's remains and Valerie Mack's and Peaches being scattered in at least 2 different areas. That's pretty scary to think about. So who would that be? Well, it took decades to arrest the suspected Long Island serial killer. And that was none other than Rex Heuermann, who worked as an architect on 5th Avenue in New York. It's one of those really in plain sight kind of cases. I mean, he seemed quite, dare I say, charismatic in his interviews. Maybe you've seen it before with me. We've watched the whole interview before. I mean, I wouldn't say charming, but like quite bubbly, charismatic, a little bit full of himself, right? But wow, he really operated in plain sight. And he is now the suspected Long Island serial killer. And the reason we're talking about this today again, and I'm going to give you a summary of what's just happened, is he's just been charged with a 7th murder. So let's quickly look at this timeline. So Rex Heuermann, 60, arrested in New York City on July 13th of 2023. I think he's actually 61 now. He was 59 at the time of his arrest. He was charged with 3 murders. So 3 out of the 4 Gilgo Four. Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Melissa Barthelemy, which was already shocking enough. Then in July of 2023, there was a 12-day search of Rex Heuermann's home. There were choppers there. You know, everybody, the whole area was just full of spectators because this was just unbelievable that they had caught the suspected Long Island serial killer after so long. So they did this 12-day search of this very humble little home in Massapequa Park, and they found more than 200 firearms in the basement area. Then on January 16th of 2024, he was charged with the murder of Maureen Brainard Barnes. So he was then charged with the Gilgo Four murders, and we all wondered, is that where it ends for him? Did he commit those murders and that's it? As terrible as that sounds. 4 is a lot. 1 is a lot. Don't kill people. But no. Then in April of 2024, police were back at this Manorville area. That's where that John Bitwolf guy lived, and he was accused of 2 murders there and suspected of others. But guess what? After searching that area, Manorville, and this North Sea area in Southampton, okay, in May of 2024, there was another 6-day search, so that was very interesting, and tents went up and all sorts of things. And then on June 6th of 2024, shockingly, Rex Heuermann was charged with the murder of Sandra Costilla and Jessica Taylor, which means something huge. It means he is an alleged dismemberer, that his MO changed over time, and that's not that uncommon when you study serial killers. If you didn't know, I wrote 4 books on serial killers. I used to really like studying them because I can't believe how they compartmentalize and how they get away with committing murder over and over and over again, how they obsess over things, how they, collect trophies and all these like newspaper clippings and things. And yeah, he's no different so far. We're going to read through the entire new superseding indictment, and there are details that he was collecting, newspaper clippings, articles, all of that kind of thing. But yes, they do sometimes change their MO over time as they evolve and things like that. So he was charged with those 2 murders. And then on December 17th of 2024, I live streamed a very significant development press conference, as it was called. And District Attorney Ray Tierney announced that Rex Heuermann was charged with Valerie Mack's murder.
As we all know by now, today my office filed a superseding indictment charging the defendant Heuermann with a 7th charged murder in the 2nd degree for the murder of Valerie Mack, which occurred in 2000.
So that's 7 now already. Now, whose murder could he be plausibly still charged with? I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. But for example, just in this area, right here between all these victims is this unidentified Asian doe who investigators say was likely between the age of 17 and 23 and suffered blunt force trauma to the head. So that's a little bit different to what happened to the other victims, but yet you never know. Then there's also Baby Doe, and that is the biological child, daughter, a toddler of Peaches, who is another unidentified victim. She's only called Peaches because there was a tattoo of a peach on her body. So dismembered remains as well. See, her torso was found up here, and Peaches' partial remains were found along this beach, just west of Tobay Beach. So there's a lot of potential here for more charges, potentially at least Asian doe, Baby Doe, Peaches, and then there's also Karen Vergara, who was known as Fire Island Jane Doe and was also just recently identified in 2024. Also, for those of you asking, look at this. We're going to discuss Valerie Mack's murder in detail today because that's what's now been the breaking news, that Rex Heuermann was charged with her murder. So we're going to find out why. Please know that this document is extremely graphic. It's upsetting. It's difficult to hear and process. I do want to tell Valerie's story. I do want to tell you what happened to her and what investigators found. But just know that absolutely viewer discretion is advised. So Valerie Mack's skull, hands, and foot were found in this area, also along Ocean Parkway. All of these victims' remains were found on the north side of Ocean Parkway, like on the same side. And so right close to Baby Doe, Valerie Mack's skull, hands, and foot were found, and her dismembered torso was actually found in this Manorville area. So look how close it was also found to Jessica Taylor's partial torso. I actually thought that Valerie Mack's skull, hands, and foot were found here, I had it the other way around, but really it was her torso found here, which is interesting because Jessica Taylor's partial torso was found here too. And then the killer would have transported partial remains down here, skull, hands, and foot. You know, and same with Jessica Taylor, partial remains down here on Gilgo Beach. So let's quickly have a look at who Valerie Mack was. And then I'm going to show you an article that actually shows us the area where Valerie Mack's remains were found. And then we're going to read through that entire superseding indictment. If you were present at the live stream, we did read through it, but I know that sometimes I stop and I put comments on the screen and things like that, and I know that's not for everyone, so this will be an uninterrupted version, maybe with a little bit of my commentary, but I'll try not to. I'll try to just read it for you. Okay, so Valerie Mack. Valerie Lynn Fulton was born on June 2nd of 1976 in Atlantic City. At an early age, Valerie was placed in foster care and lived in many foster homes until she was adopted by the Mack family. When she was 17 years old in 1994, Valerie had a son and moved in with her son's father in Wildwood, New Jersey. She traveled frequently between Wildwood, New Jersey and Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. Valerie was a sex worker between 1996 and 2000, sometimes advertising online, but also street walking. So I would assume that's maybe how she ended up in the New York area because that's where Rex Heuermann operated. I'm just very plausibly speculating that that's likely where he picked her up, as he did with many of the victims' murders that he's already been charged with. So investigators believe that Valerie was murdered sometime between September 1st of 2000 and November 19th of 2000. Her dismembered torso was discovered in Maniville by hunters on November 19th of 2000, and then on April 4th of 2011, her skull, hands, and foot were found on Gilgo Beach. On May 28th of 2020, Jane Doe number 6 was identified as Valerie Mack, and she was 24 years old when she died. And it took 20 years to identify her remains through the use of forensic genealogy. On December 17th of 2024, Rex Heuermann, the suspected Long Island serial killer, was charged with her murder. And you know what? They said in court, he actually spoke. I think he's probably feeling like, you know what, now it's time to speak up because I think he's quite a talkative guy. And he apparently said in a loud voice. Some people say he shouted it. Some people say it was in a loud voice. Some people are describing it as quite calm. So I'm not sure. I think he would generally, he's a very tall guy. He would probably have a loud voice. I don't know. But he said to the judge that he is not guilty of any of these murders that he's being charged with. So he had his little say there, and yet, yeah, he's been charged with a 7th murder. Now, he is presumed innocent until proven guilty. I would just say the evidence is quite overwhelming. If you've never read through the probable cause affidavit with me, please go and check that out on the playlist, because how they discovered him, how he became a suspect, how they then found all the evidence connecting him to these crimes. It's quite an incredible story. And I think the special task force, which was formed in 2022 with really passionate detectives that wanted to solve this case, I think they did an amazing job. And they already had their eyes on him within months of forming that special task force. So I want to show you this, which might be helpful. It certainly helps me when I can see it like this. As sad as it is to see all these faces on the screen for the same reason, is that it's suspected that an alleged serial killer, Rex Heuermann, murdered them all. But I think it might be helpful to see the chronological order of when these victims went missing and things like that. So I'm going to take myself off the screen for a second so that I can make this bigger for you so that you can really see it. So Sandra Costilla was 28 years old and murdered between November 19th and 20th of 1993. That's why there was a huge deal when in June Rex Heuermann was charged with her murder, because that also added on more than a decade of time for which to consider unsolved cases in. Her body was found on November 20th of 1993. Investigators say she was strangled, she was partially clothed, and she was stabbed post-mortem. Rex Heuermann would have been around 30 years old at the time. Now, Valerie Mack, that's his latest murder charge. She was 24 years old and she was murdered September to November 2000, somewhere between there. Her dismembered torso was found November 19th of 2000 in Manaville. Her skull, foot, and hands were found April 4th, 2011 on Gilgo Beach. And Jane Doe number 6 was identified in May of 2020. So Rex Heuermann would have been around 37 years old at the time. Then, victim Jessica Taylor, 20 years old, last seen July 19th of 2003. She spoke to her mom on the phone on July 21st of 2003. She was murdered between July 21st and 26th of 2003, and her torso was found July 26th of 2003. Her skull, hands, and forearm were found on March 29th of 2011, and Rex Heuermann was around 39 years old at the time. Maureen Brainard Barnes, 25 years old, last seen July 9th of 2007. Her body was found December 13th of 2010. Police believe she was asphyxiated, and Rex Heuermann would have been around 43 years old. 24-year-old Melissa Barthélemy was last seen July 10th of 2009. Her body was found December 11th of 2010. Police believe that she was asphyxiated. Rex Heuermann would have been around 45 years old. Megan Waterman, 22 years old, last seen July 6th of 2010. Her body was found December 13th of 2010. And police believe that she was asphyxiated. Rex Heuermann would have been around 46 years old. And then Amberlynn Costello, 27 years old, last seen September 2nd of 2010. Her body was found December 13th of 2010, and police believe that she was asphyxiated. Rex Heuermann would have been about 47 years old. If you're wondering why it says second degree, second, and then first, those are the charges that Rex Heuermann is facing. 3 counts of first-degree murder and 7 counts of second-degree murder at this time. Of course, I will update you as the case progresses. There's been quite a lot of press conferences we've watched together and a lot of documents that are very detailed that have been released. So let's look a little bit more at Valerie Mack's case, since that is the most recent murder charge that Rex Heuermann is facing. My source for this is oddstops.com, and I will link it in the description box for you. The site where Valerie Mack was found. This is the site where Valerie Mack was found. It is situated in a wooded area near Halsey Manor Road in Manaville, New York. The police believe that Mack is a victim of suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann. On December 12th of 2024, Heuermann was charged with Mack's murder after a hair found on her wrist proved to be a DNA match with his daughter. Remember, his daughter was only between the age of 3 and 5 at the time, so people jump to the conclusion, if they don't like her artwork, that somehow she's involved. I'm just not on that page at all. And at the time, as I say, she was between the age of 3 and 5. So on the morning of November 19th of 2003, pheasant hunters were walking along a trail in the area when their dog ventured into the bushes and located Mack's dismembered torso. The remains of the 24-year-old sex worker had been wrapped in several layers of garbage bags and then dumped in the thicket beside an access road. So I'm very grateful for these pictures because we can then gather what the area looked like. So here they say one of the entrances to the wooded area where Mack's remains were found, courtesy of the documentary The Bad Place, The Hunt for the Long Island Serial Killer. It is likely that the killer was somewhat familiar with these wooded trails. Given the terrain involved, he was almost certainly driving a truck. And guess what? Rex Heuermann drove a truck. So that does make sense, especially in hindsight. So here they're also showing an aerial view of the area. They say this west-facing aerial photograph shows police vehicles at the crime scene. The killer dumped Mack's remains close to where these two trails intersect. The most obvious reason for selecting this location is that it gave him enough space to reverse and then leave the same way that he entered. It was also far enough away from both of the main entrances. To get in and out as quickly as possible, he would have had to enter the woods via the southern entrance on Mill Road and then drive northward along the trail for roughly 420 yards. Bear in mind that Rex Heuermann had this planning document that they found that he had deleted. It was a Word document. We're going to go over that again when we read the superseding indictment, the new one. But he had actually written down DS for what investigators believe would be dump site, Mill Road. So it's very interesting that he would have had to enter the woods via the southern entrance on Mill Road and then drive northward along the trail for roughly 420 yards, as you can see there. This aerial photograph was taken in April of 2004. A gate was erected at the southern entrance at some point during the 2000s. The northbound trail above the blue line is almost non-existent in Google Maps and newer aerial photographs. It is likely that the restriction on vehicle access led to it becoming overgrown. After dumping Mack's remains in the bushes, it is likely that the killer reversed his vehicle and headed back towards the Mill Road entrance. This was the most optimal route if he wanted to minimize the amount of time that he spent at the site. Mack's killer dismembered her body in an attempt to hinder her identification. By removing her head and hands, he was able to prevent the authorities from cross-referencing her dental records and fingerprints. This strategy largely worked as she remained unidentified for 2 decades. During this period, she was known as Manival Jane Doe, or Jane Doe number 6. The rest of her remains were discovered at Gilgo Beach. On April 4th of 2011, the police discovered a female's skull, right foot, and hands near Gilgo Beach. The victim was referred to as Jane Doe number 6 until DNA tests confirmed that the partial remains belonged to the same woman whose torso had been found in Manival in 2000. Due to her proximity to the other victims at Gilgo Beach, it quickly became clear that she was a victim of the Long Island serial killer. In this case, LISK, the Long Island serial killer, dismembered his victims' remains and dumped them at 2 locations that were 45 miles apart. Despite finding her skull at Gilgo Beach, another decade would pass before the authorities were able to finally give Manival Jane Doe back her name. Mack's identifying remains were discovered near Gilgo Beach on April 4th of 2011. Manival Jane Doe is identified as Valerie Mack. On May 29th of 2020, the police announced that Manival Jane Doe had been identified as Valerie Mack, a missing 24-year-old from Port Republic, New Jersey. Investigators uncovered her identity using genetic genealogy testing, which enabled them to track down her son, Benjamin. Benjamin's DNA had been entered into the system after he was incarcerated for an unstated crime. Mack was an escort who lost contact with her family during the fall of 2000. She was born on June 2nd of 1976 as Valerie Lynn Fulton. Her mother, Patricia Fulton, had a substance abuse problem. As a result, she spent most of her childhood in the foster system, moving from home to home. The Mack family adopted Valerie when she was 9 years old. At first, everything was great, and she fit in well with her new surroundings. However, as she grew older, she started hanging around the wrong kind of people. As time wore on, Mack developed a drug addiction and became involved in the sex trade. The last thing her family heard was that she was going to New York with a guy. Although they attempted to report her missing, the police were of the opinion that the young sex worker had willingly moved elsewhere, because a lot of people give the family quite a bit of shade for not reporting her missing, but it sounds like they had actually tried to. There was just not an official missing persons report. Also, because of her age, 24 years old, they would say, well, she can come and go as she pleases. So at the time of her disappearance, Mack's last known address was in Philadelphia. However, she may have drifted toward New York. When the identification was made, her family was understandably shocked to learn that her remains had been discovered 170 miles away at this remote site in Manival. Now, if you didn't watch the press conference with me, you might want to go check it out, because we saw attorney Gloria Allred, who's representing many of the victims' families, actually handing out roses to Valerie Mack's adoptive parents. And that was really a beautiful moment to see. So I would highly recommend checking that out. It's all linked in the description box for you. So here's some other photos of the Manival site where Valerie Mack was found. And as you can see from the map time we just did, very close to where Jessica Taylor's remains were also found. Also partial remains, also a torso in this area. 3 hunters discovered Valerie Mack's torso close to a power line access road that runs alongside the LIRR main line in Manaville. Public statements from the Suffolk County Police Department suggest that Mack's remains were found near the intersection of Mill Road and Halsey Manor Road. This is inaccurate as crime scene photographs show that the site was considerably further west in a wooded area that is close to the railroad. The imprecise SCPD description creates the impression that the killer pulled over to the side of a public road and then quickly dumped her remains. However, this was not the case. Accessing the site is not a straightforward endeavor for vehicles, as both entrances bring you through narrow wooded trails. The fact that the Long Island serial killer drove into one of these obscure entrances indicates that he is somewhat familiar with Manaville. This theory is further supported by his decision to reuse Halsey Manor Road as a dump site following the murder of Jessica Taylor in 2003. Here they say Powerline Access Road. This Powerline Access Road runs alongside the LIRR main line and the, I gotta say that right. I can't remember how to exactly pronounce this like a local. I'm not gonna try. I'm not gonna botch it. That river. The southern entrance, it says the southern entrance provides direct access to the trail where Mack's remains were found. It is unlikely that someone drove through this narrow, wooded pathway with dismembered remains in their vehicle unless they knew exactly where it led, especially if it was late at night. Google Street View shows that there are no streetlights along this stretch of road, which is also a common factor with Ocean Parkway there near Gilgo Beach. At the time, there were no streetlights. Obviously, now there are. And so they say, we know from these previous cases that serial killers prefer to operate in places where they feel comfortable. So creepy if you could be a fly on that wall, right? To actually see them doing all of this in the middle of the night, probably. That is so scary. This is because operating in unknown territory can be risky and unpredictable. Again, this shows that the Long Island serial killer is at least somewhat familiar with this area of Manaville. Due to the terrain, it is likely that he was driving a truck or another 4x4 vehicle. Locals have said that people do not drive into these woods unless they have a truck, van, or some other type of off-road vehicle. Here is the eastern entrance, and they say this Google Street View image of the eastern entrance on Halsey Manor Road was taken in May of 2012. These are really great photographs. Okay, so I'm linking this article for you if you want to check it out yourself as well. And so here they say, in this comparison image, we've matched a crime scene photograph of the site with a satellite image from 2001. We highlighted certain points by adding color-coded dots. Note that the Mill Road Trail is difficult to see in modern-day satellite photos. Trails. This is the wooded trail where her torso was found. Locals do not believe that a complete stranger to Manaville would have ventured into this area. Woods. There are a number of interconnected trails in the area that hunters, hikers, nature enthusiasts, and dirt bike riders like to use. It is also frequently used as an illegal dumping ground for household waste. The body was discovered by 3 hunters. This is now an old newspaper clipping. 3 hunters discovered the remains November 19th, it was in 2000, in a wooded area west of Halsey Manor Road and near a utility right-of-way. The site is also near a nature trail. Cops said that the area is a popular destination for hunters and naturalists. The nude body had been dismembered and stuffed into plastic garbage bags. The victim's hands and head were missing. Detective Sergeant Arthur Ahl said the remains may have been there for 2 to 6 weeks. This newspaper article was published in the Daily News on November 29th of 2000. The area is a popular destination for hunters and naturalists, and we know that Rex Heuermann was a hunter. He bragged about hunting bears. Detective Arthur Ahl stated his belief that Mack's remains were dumped in the area at some point between October 8th and November 5th of 2000. The autopsy estimated that she was killed late August and early November. Manaville in 2001. This aerial image from 2001 shows the access road and various trails. Although the SCPD said that she was found near Mill Road and Halsey Manor, Blue Circle, this is imprecise. In reality, the killer dumped her remains further west, Red Circle. I like it when they give us these accurate points as well, right? Oh, I see. So you see, this would have been more like an easier road to navigate, but they say where he actually placed her remains would be in this Red Circle area. So going on these roads that then he would plausibly know quite well. Mack's remains were discovered at 2 different sites. They were discovered at locations that are 45 miles apart. Although her torso was discovered in November of 2000, it wasn't until April 2011 that her skull, hands, and foot were uncovered in the bushes near Gilgo. The police theorized that the killer removed her foot because it may have had a tattoo or another identifying mark. In that superseding indictment that we're going to read, the new one, they do talk about that she had a tattoo on her foot, and that is likely why that was not found with everything else. I wonder where it is then. Okay, Gilgo Beach. On April 4th of 2011, a police search team discovered Mack's identifying remains at the section of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. By that stage, she had been dead for more than 10 years. Her remains were found 250 feet away from the body of Baby Doe, who was an infant daughter of an unidentified LISK victim called Peaches. It would have taken the killer approximately 45 minutes to drive between this site and Manaville. Okay, so now that we have done all of this background work, now we're going to look at the new superseding indictment, and again, trigger warning because it is very disturbing to hear. Supreme Court of Suffolk County, State of New York. This was obviously provided. This is the bail application document as well, and this was provided to the media on December 17th of 2024. So it's the latest document in this case. Now, what they go over in the first few pages is what we've already been over before, which would be all the charges that he already faced. And of course, they added the charge of Valerie Mack to it. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit here so that we can get to the page where I need to start reading all the new information to you. If you were at the live stream, you've already heard a lot of this before, but this is now going to be an uninterrupted, clean copy version for you. Today, defendant Rex A. Heuermann stands before this court charged by the grand jury in another superseding indictment, which incorporates each and every one of the above counts, as well as an additional charge of murder in the second degree in violation of those New York State penal law codes, violent felony for the death of Valerie Mack on or about or between September 1st of 2000 and November 19th of 2000. The people filed a written application at Rex A. Heuermann's initial arraignment, which occurred on July 14th of 2023, as well as at the defendant's arraignments on the superseding indictments, which occurred on January 16th of 2024 and June 6th of 2024, respectively. Those applications are annexed hereto as Exhibit A. On July 14th of 2023, the Honorable Richard Ambrose ordered that defendant Rex A. Heuermann be remanded without bail. This matter subsequently adjourned to August 1st of 2023 before the Honorable Timothy P. Mazzei. On August 1st of 2023, and in the ensuing appearances that have followed, this court has continued to remand the defendant without bail. Set forth below is the people's bail application in support of the new superseding indictment, which will expand on additional evidentiary developments in this investigation, now charging defendant Heuermann with the murder of an additional victim, Valerie Mack, based on the defendant Heuermann's indictment on an additional murder charge as it pertains to now a seventh victim, the serious and heinous nature of these serial murders, the planning and forethought that went into these crimes, the strength of the people's case, the extended period of time that this defendant was able to avoid apprehension, the length of incarceration that the defendant faces upon conviction, and the remaining facts set forth herein and contained within Exhibit A, the people remain steadfast that the only means to ensure defendant Rex A. Heuermann's return to court is to remand him without bail. At this point, a trial date has not been set yet. I think the investigation they're still very busy with that. But at some point, it was rumored that it was going to be set yesterday. So I'm sure that soon enough, we're going to hear an initial trial date for these 7 murder charges while they're working on the investigation of other unsolved murders that could be connected to the same killer. So we also won't be able to see the trial because in New York, they don't have cameras in the courtroom either. So the 2000 and 2011 discovery of the human remains of Valerie Mack. On or about November 19th of 2000, 3 individuals whose identities are known to law enforcement were hunting with a dog in a wooded area of Manaville, hereinafter Hunters. At approximately 10:50 a.m., While hunting at that above location together, the hunter's dog alerted the group to a black plastic bag, which was wrapped with duct tape. Said bag was located approximately 1 mile west of Halsey Manor Road and north of Mill Road. See embedded map below, as denoted by the red place mark under the numbers, as they put it there, which is the unique central complaint number assigned to the investigation. On or about July 26th of 2003, Jessica Taylor's partial remains were found in an area just west of Halsey Manor Road. Ms. Taylor had been decapitated and her arms had been severed from her body below her elbows. Ms. Taylor's remains were located approximately a half a mile from where Valerie Mack's body was recovered. See image above, as denoted by the red place mark under the numbers, as you can see there, which is the unique central complaint number assigned to that matter. So this is where they say they found Jessica Taylor's remains, and this is around where they found Valerie Mack's remains. Inside said bag, the hunters observed additional black plastic bags and ultimately a set of human remains. The hunters' discovery prompted them to call 911. Upon arrival, members of the Suffolk County Police Department, hereinafter the SCPD, observed the remains of a female, later identified as Valerie Mack, and by later they mean 20 years later. Notably, the victim was decapitated, just like Jessica Taylor. Moreover, both of her hands had been severed from her body above the wrist, and the victim's right leg had also been cut off from her body at the mid-calf. Ms. Mack's torso, legs, and arms were also bound with rope. During the initial investigation in Manorville in 2000, Ms. Mack's head, hands, and right foot were not found at the scene, and their location remained unknown to law enforcement for approximately 11 years. You know what I just realized, and maybe you realized this before me? So the killer cut off one foot. So earlier when I said, I wonder where her left foot then would be, it would still be attached to the remains that they found, right? On April 4th of 2011, as part of the expanded search of the Gilgo Beach area, Valerie Mack's skull, hands, and right foot were discovered along Ocean Parkway just east of Gilgo Beach, Suffolk County, New York. Ms. Mack's remains were discovered less than 1.5 miles east from where Jessica Taylor's skull, hands, and forearm were discovered. See embedded image on the following page. Notably, each of the 5 previously discovered remains on Gilgo Beach, as well as the skull, hands, and right foot of Ms. Mack, were recovered on the same side of the road and at a similar depth of within 50 feet from the edge of the parkway. Hereinafter, spaces left intentionally blank. The 5 prior victims discovered on Gilgo Beach include Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, hereinafter the Gilgo Four, as well as Jessica Taylor. So we had a detailed look at the map before this. During the initial investigation, as Miss Mack's identity remained unknown to law enforcement, the victim had been referred to as Jane Doe number 6. However, utilizing a DNA sample developed from Miss Mack's remains on or about May 28th of 2020, local law enforcement, working with a genetic genealogist from the FBI, as well as the Suffolk County Crime Lab, and outside labs were able to determine the identity of Jane Doe number 6 as Valerie Mack. Information relevant to the disappearance of Valerie Mack. Valerie Mack was born on June 2nd of 1976 in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Her birth name was Valerie Lynn Fulton. At an early age, Miss Mack was placed in foster care and shuffled between several foster homes until she was ultimately adopted by the Mack family. In 1994, at the age of 17, Miss Mack gave birth to a son and began living with her son's father in Wildwood, New Jersey. Shortly thereafter, she began frequently traveling to and from Wildwood, New Jersey to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In 1996, Valerie had her first contact with the Pennsylvania law enforcement, resulting in the first of several prostitution-related arrests by the Philadelphia Police Department. Miss Mack's final arrest came on or about June 25th of 2000. Based on the foregoing and investigation to date, between 1996 and 2000, Miss Mack is believed to have been working as a sex worker primarily in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Atlantic City, New Jersey areas. While she did advertise online, primarily under the alias of Melissa Taylor, Miss Mack was also known to streetwalk, i.e. wander the streets looking for sex work. Shortly after the discovery of her remains in Manorville, Miss Mack's body was examined by a forensic pathologist with the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office. as well as forensic anthropologists who were able to determine that the victim had been deceased for approximately 2 to 8 weeks. Recently, the Suffolk County Medical Examiner's Office conducted an independent review of these findings and determined that Miss Mack's death would have occurred, more specifically, on or about and between September 1st of 2000 and November 19th of 2000. At the time of her death, Miss Mack would have been 24 years old. The examination of the remains of Valerie Mack. In addition to the aforementioned decapitation and dismemberment of Miss Mack's head and hands respectively, the medical examiner's office was also able to determine that Miss Mack's lower right leg had been amputated at the mid-calf. Moreover, the examination revealed injuries to the victim's left mid and lateral breast in the form of 2 contiguous ragged defects, which were likely the result of post-mortem mutilation of the victim's breast with a sharp object. Ms. Mack's remains were also examined by forensic scientists with the SCCL. During the examination of Ms. Mack's body, several human hairs were recovered, one of which was found in the vicinity of the decedent's left wrist, hereinafter female hair on Mack. A subsequent examination of the female hair on Mack led to the determination that it was a human head hair with Caucasian characteristics. However, it was, based on the DNA testing capabilities at the SCCL, unsuitable for further DNA testing at that time. On or about March 29th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force brought a cutting of the female hair on Mack to an outside forensics laboratory, previously referred to in Exhibit A as Forensic Lab Number 2, which specializes in forensic mitochondrial analysis. On or about October 14th of 2024, Forensic Lab Number 2 issued a report concluding that the partial mitochondrial DNA profile developed from the female hair on Mack and the known mitochondrial DNA profiles of Asa Ellerup and Victoria Heuermann shared a common base at all locations, specifically at a rate that would, as per the MPOP database, exclude 99.65% of the North American population as the contributor of said hair recovered near the dismembered left wrist of the victim. Now, if you didn't know, Asa Ellerup was Rex Heuermann's wife. She has since filed for divorce, but yet she's still very much in support of him and says she's going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty, but I know there's a lot of discussion about that. And Victoria Heuermann is Rex Heuermann's biological daughter. They also have he has a stepson, which would be Asa Ellerup's son. Rex Heuermann was also married before. If you want to go on down a rabbit hole, a deep dive of Rex Heuermann year by year, from when he was born, just every phase of his life, we have done that before. So just check that out on the playlist. And by that I mean when he got married for the first time, when they got divorced, when the first alleged murder happened, although I think it could go further back than that, or, there could be a lot more that he'll eventually be connected to. But yes, that is available. So they said here, while 99.65% of the North American population can be excluded as the contributor of the female hair on Mack, defendant Heuermann's wife and daughter, who share a mitochondrial DNA profile, cannot be excluded as the contributor of said hair recovered from the remains of Valerie Mack. On or about October 29th of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force sent a cutting of the female hair on Mack to an outside independent lab, previously referred to as Exhibit A as Forensic Lab 1, which applies DNA techniques and direct genome sequencing in difficult-to-solve forensic casework and the identification of human remains. On or about November 26th of 2024, Forensic Lab Number 1 issued a report indicating that it had developed a nuclear DNA profile for the female hair on Mack. Forensic Lab Number 1 was then able to conduct a 1-to-1 autosomal nuclear DNA comparison between said profile developed from the female hair on Mack to Victoria Heuermann's SNP genotype file developed from her buccal swab, which resulted in the conclusion that the DNA profile generated from the female hair on Mack is a huge number times more likely to have come from a person genetically identical to Victoria Heuermann's SNP genotype file than from any unrelated individual. I just want to go back up here to the footnotes. So where they say MPOP is shorthand for the European DNA Profile Group, EDNAP, Mitochondrial DNA Population Database, which is a web-based collection of human mitochondrial sequence data from various populations worldwide. The North American database includes 12,386 sequences of North American forensic significance. And here they also say, since humans inherit their mitochondrial DNA solely from their mothers, a mother and her children, example Asa Ellerup and Victoria Heuermann respectively, would share the same mitochondrial DNA profile. As set forth below, Forensic Lab Number 1's nuclear DNA comparison provides clarity as to who within Asa Ellerup and Victoria Heuermann's mitochondrial profile is the contributor of the female hair on Mac, and it ended up being Victoria Heuermann's. And so let's just continue reading here, where they said, based on the foregoing, it is significant that 2 forensic labs have now independently determined that the aforementioned hair, which was inside the sealed black garbage bags containing Miss Mack's remains, specifically near the victim's dismembered left wrist, is substantially more likely to have derived from a person genetically identical to Victoria Heuermann's DNA profile, thereby linking evidence from yet another crime scene to the defendant through his immediate family. Notably, at the time of Miss Mack's disappearance and murder, defendant Heuermann's daughter would have been between 3 and 4 years old. It would be very easy for there to be a transfer of hairs in the home, especially if he's then, dismembering the victims in his home. The chart on the following page summarizes the results from Forensic Lab Number 1 and Forensic Lab Number 2, which each individually have been able to determine that hairs recovered on now 6 of the 7 charged victims are forensically tied to defendant Heuermann, members of his immediate family, or individuals with whom Heuermann resided, lending further support to the conclusion that defendant Heuermann murdered and transported the remains of each victim. Here's another footnote. Forensic Lab Number 1 developed 3 separate DNA libraries from the female hair on Mac. For the purposes of this application, the most conservative statistic is provided. Furthermore, that huge number stat and the following statistical probabilities are provided in scientific notation. The standard notation is all of that. Huge numbers, very, very likely to obviously be the results that they found. Again, if you want to pause to read here, we've looked at this chart before, and here what they've obviously added would be the victim Valerie Mack. But they've got Sandra Costillas here, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, all the others, of course. So Valerie Mack, they said female hair on Mac, inside garbage bags containing victim near the victim's left wrist. 99.65% of North American population can be excluded, but not Asa Ellerup or Victoria Heuermann. And then they say it's this many times more likely to come from an individual with the identical genetic profile as Victoria Heuermann. I think that's horrifying. Imagine being the biological daughter of an alleged serial killer, especially one that is this high profile, the Long Island serial killer that they tried to catch for decades. But then your hair from when you were 3 or 4 years old is found near the dismembered wrist of one of the victims. I think that is absolutely horrifying. I really feel for Victoria and what she might be going through right now in learning this information. Of course, she may have learned it before. They're only announcing this to us now, but there's lots going on behind the scenes. That's what we can also gather from all of this, right? Okay, so digital evidence as it relates to the disappearance and murder of Valerie Mack. As detailed in Exhibit A, following his arrest, numerous search warrants were executed at Rex Heuermann's residence, which culminated in, inter alia, the seizure of over 350 electronic devices. In the months subsequent to Heuermann's arrest, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force has attempted to extract and analyze data from each of these devices. As previously detailed, an analysis of these devices has revealed Heuermann's significant collection of violent bondage, and torture pornography, currently dating back to 1994. Moreover, in the months leading up to Miss Mack's disappearance and murder, the task force uncovered pornographic images accessed by Heuermann, which include breast mutilation and the tying up of women with rope, which largely coincide with A, the injuries inflicted on Miss Mack's breast, and B, how the rope ligatures were utilized on Valerie Mack. More specifically, during the month of September 2000, investigators observed a large uptick in downloads of pornographic images depicting bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism, so BDSM. These pornographic downloads were discovered on a compact disc located in Heuermann's home office. Specifically relevant to the Mack investigation is on May 23rd of 2020 and July 30th of 2020, Rex A. Heuermann's home IP address was used to access GilgoNews.com. Remember, he was arrested in 2023. So yeah, he was very active in researching all of this. They also say a website previously, so this was GilgoNews.com, a website previously maintained by the SCPD to disseminate information regarding the Gilgo Beach investigation. Notably, on May 23rd of 2020, at approximately 11:30 p.m., at the time Rex Heuermann's home IP address visited GilgoNews.com, the webpage highlighted the upcoming identification of Manaville Jane Doe, who would 5 days later be identified as Valerie Mack. On July 30th of 2020, at approximately 10:50 p.m., Heuermann's home IP address once again visited the Mack-specific portions of the GilgoNews.com website for information pertaining to the investigation. As previously noted, in March of 2024, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force extracted a Microsoft Word document entitled HK 2002-04. Now, many have speculated what the hell the HK stands for. Could it be Heuermann kills? Could it be Hunter Killer? Could it be, many things. We don't know exactly what the HK was for, but that's what he titled it. And they actually believe he made the document in 2000 already, but they say from Heuermann's laptop computer. As set forth in further detail in Exhibit A, specifically the June 6th, 2024 bail application, which I also read in full to you, the task force members believe the Microsoft Word document to be a planning document utilized by Heuermann to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills, hereinafter referred to as HK planning document, attached here to as Exhibit B. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force subsequently hired a digital forensics expert who was able to determine that while this iteration, Exhibit B, of the HK planning document appeared to have been created and modified between 2001 and 2002, the original document appears to have been created in the year 2000, which notably coincides with the year that Valerie Mack was murdered. In addition to the document's creation in the same year that Valerie Mack was murdered, the HK planning document substantively relates to the Mack investigation in other respects. First, the HK planning document begins with a 4-category section with the underlined headings of problems, supplies, DS, and TRG. See embedded excerpt below. So they think DS is for dump site and TRG is for target, perhaps. So if we look at this list, we've now looked at this multiple times, so I'm just going to show you the highlighted bits here. They say rope, cord, saw or cutting tools, foam, drain cleaner. Remember there I told you earlier, remember Mill Road? DS1, Mill Road, DS2, lots of question marks. And then TRG, small is good. This is something that they believe Rex Heuermann had typed up using Microsoft Word and that it was created in 2000 and that modified in 2001 and 2, and that he later deleted it. But they found it. Based on the Gilgo Homicide Task Force training and experience, it is believed the DS heading appears to be an acronym for dump site, which is corroborated by inter alia the discovery of Valerie Mack at 2 separate dump sites, one of those locations being the vicinity of Mill Road, which is listed as DS1 Mill Road in the above Word document. On April 4th of 2011, Miss Mack's skeletonized skull, hands, and right foot were recovered near Ocean Parkway, a second dump site. As detailed previously, TRG appears to be a reference to target or victim. They say see blue boxes above, we just saw them. It's important to note that at the time of Miss Mack's disappearance and murder, she was approximately 5 feet tall and weighed less than 110 pounds, fitting the small is good note in the HK planning document regarding the types of victims targeted by the defendant. Based on the Gilgo Homicide Task Force's training and experience, the members believe supplies to be a reference to what supplies are needed to carry out the serial murders. One of the listed supplies is foam drain cleaner. Notably, a review of Heuermann's Nextel cellular phone records reveals that on October 3rd of 2000, Heuermann appears to make 2 outgoing calls to a plumbing company based in Lynbrook, whose identity is known to law enforcement. Furthermore, in mid-November 2000, Heuermann paid $265.83 to yet another plumbing company to check his mainline drain. The supplies section includes notes to utilize rope or cord and bags or tape, each of which were recovered with the remains of the victim. During the course of this investigation, well before the identification of Rex A. Heuermann as a suspect in the murders of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, a forensic scientist with the SCCL compared the garbage bags containing the 2011 remains of Valerie Mack to the garbage bags containing the 2011 remains of Jessica Taylor. At the conclusion of this examination, the SCCL was able to determine noticeable similarities in the bags based on, inter alia, material, color, seal location, knots, perforations, size, and the type of closure, thereby connecting the Mack and Taylor cases not only by location, Manaville and Gilgo dump sites, victimology, petite sex workers, and modus operandi, decapitation, dismemberment, and dump of identifiable body parts, skull and hands near Gilgo Beach, while the other portions of the victim were dumped in Manaville. I'm telling you, I hate saying the word dumped in these cases. Disposed, right? Okay, but anyway, I'm just going to read the document to you, okay? But also via supplies, i.e. similar garbage bags utilized in both crimes. Similarly, well before the identification of Rex A. Heuermann as a suspect in the murders of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, a forensic anthropologist with the New York City office of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office noted similarities in the type of cutting instrument used to dismember both victims. Specifically, the forensic anthropologist analyzed the cut bones of both victims, which led to the conclusion that a hand-powered saw with similar blade widths were utilized in the dismemberments of both Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack. This is significant in that it is yet another link, not only between the two victims, but also to the HK planning document, namely a similar supply, saw or cutting tools, used in both crimes. As noted above, the HK planning document contains a body prep section, reproduced on the following page, with a note to remove head and hands, which clearly relates to the condition of Valerie Mack's remains. Additionally, Valerie Mack was indeed packaged for transport, as this section indicates to do, further increasing the significance of this document's presence on Heuermann's laptop computer. At this point, I just want to say, if you feel like, ooh, this is getting a little too much, just know that your seat is always saved here at Grizzly True Crime, and you can always come back and watch the rest of this later. Make sure you look after your mental health and yourself, because this is very heavy, all right? Of the 4 garbage bags recovered in the 2011 recovery sites of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, 2 for each victim, 3 of the 4 bags were 40 by 32 inch. Only the outer plastic bag containing Jessica Taylor's remains was 48 by 32. Despite this difference, the outer plastic bag was similar to the other 3 garbage bags with respect to material, color, knot, perforations, seal location, and type of closure. Now here we go again with this body prep part that he had allegedly typed up, which has bullet points. That's the only good thing I could say about it. There's bullet points. But okay, wash body inside and all cavities. Remove trace evidence, fingerprints or hair. Remove trace DNA. Remove ID marks, tattoos and marks. remove marks from torture, remove head and hands, package for transport. Finally, the body prep section above includes a note to remove ID marks or tattoos. Recently, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force interviewed several witnesses who confirmed that Valerie Mack had a tattoo on her foot or ankle which depicted her son's name. The examination of the victim's body in 2000 revealed no tattoos on the victim's left foot or ankle. Accordingly, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that Miss Mack's tattoo of her son's name was on her right foot or ankle. That inference is corroborated not only by the foregoing examination and witness statements, but also by the notations on Heuermann's laptop computer, specifically the HK planning document, which call for the removal of any ID marks, including tattoos, prior to packaging the body for transportation. Can you believe the words that I'm saying? Packaging the body for transportation. Oh my goodness. Furthermore, Rex A. Heuermann is charged with the murder of Jessica Taylor, whereupon the people allege that the defendant engaged in similar post-mortem behavior in the form of sharp force mutilation to Miss Taylor's tattoo so as to prevent and obfuscate her identification via tattoo. Based on the foregoing, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe the defendant amputated Miss Mack's lower right leg at the mid-calf to inhibit and or delay the identification of Miss Mack's tattoo and therefore Miss Mack. Physical evidence recovered via search warrant from Rex Heuermann's home and office. In July of 2023, law enforcement executed search warrants on inter alia Rex A. Heuermann's home and Manhattan office. On or about July 15th of 2023, while executing the court-authorized search warrant in Manhattan, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force observed a magazine in Rex Heuermann's personal office, specifically a People magazine which had been issued on November 7th of 2016. The magazine, entitled Bodies on the Beach, Hunt for the Long Island Serial Killer, who is the cold-blooded murderer killing women and dumping their bodies on a New York beach, was recovered from a cardboard box directly in front of Rex A. Heuermann's work desk. You know what's a scary thought? Is how much did he discuss this case with his family? That must haunt them too. Because look at all of this just at his workplace, and we know that Victoria Heuermann worked there with him. I'm sure he had conversations about this case. Oh man. Additionally, on or about July 16th of 2023, while executing a search warrant, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force observed another magazine, this time located in the basement vault of Rex Heuermann's residence. The New York magazine, which had been issued on June 6th of 2011, featured a cover story regarding a serial killer on Long Island. See embedded images below. My goodness. Between May 20th and 25th of 2024, law enforcement executed a second search warrant on the defendant's Massapequa Park residence. Notably, on May 21st of 2024, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force seized newspapers from Rex A. Heuermann's primary bedroom, which included a New York Post newspaper that had been issued on July 29th of 2003. Said newspaper included an article entitled Serial Killer Eyed in L.I. Slay, which contained details surrounding the disappearance and murders of Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. Wow. Finally, on May 21st of 2024, agents of the Gilgo Homicide Task Force also seized newspapers from the basement of Heuermann's residence, which included a Newsday publication issued on November 22nd of 1993. Said newspaper included an article entitled Body Discovered in Woods, which specifically referenced the homicide investigation of Sandra Costilla, whose partially clothed body was discovered in a wooded area of Northsea, Southampton on Saturday, November 20th, 1993. So there you could see this little newspaper clipping as well. The Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that these newspapers and magazines were store-bought as they lack any indication of postmarks or subscription tags. Based on the totality of the investigation, the task force believes Rex A. Heuermann sought, purchased, and kept these publications as inter alia souvenirs or mementos of his crimes, serving as a reminder of the events that occurred throughout the murders of each victim. Based on the foregoing, Rex A. Heuermann is now charged with the murders of 7 victims. Of note, 2 independent labs have forensically linked evidence from 6 of the 7 crime scenes to defendant Heuermann and or members of his immediate family or individuals with whom Heuermann resided. Second, the HK planning documents creation in 2000, the same year that Valerie Mack was murdered, as well as his description of DS1, or the first dump site as Mill Road, which is where the remains of Miss Mack were discovered, further emphasizes the document's relevance to the Valerie Mack homicide investigation. Furthermore, the dismemberment of Miss Mack's right leg, where she had a tattoo of her son's name, was clearly intended to inhibit the identification of Miss Mack, which is corroborated by the HK planning document, its presence on Heuermann's laptop computer, and the mutilation of Jessica Taylor's tattoo in a similar fashion. Finally, the Gilgo Homicide Task Force members believe that Rex A. Heuermann's possession of numerous publications relating not only to the Gilgo Four, but also Sandra Costilla, Valerie Mack, and Jessica Taylor indicates the defendant's attempts to remind himself of the events that occurred throughout the murders of each victim, revealing that Rex A. Heuermann's utter lack of disregard of or remorse for his actions or the victims. Now that makes me wonder. They're telling us that these are the articles they found based on the charges that he now has. What if there were other articles found, for example, about Asian doe, Peaches? Maybe it was after Peaches he decided to start mutilating tattoos because she was so identified by the tattoo, right? So I wonder if there's other articles that they found amongst this. I would think so. They're probably just still working on connecting the dots, on the evidence to be able to charge him with those murders. So here they say penalties. If convicted on the current charges, defendant Rex A. Heuermann faces multiple sentences of life without parole. He's never going to have real butter again. If you don't know why I say that, he literally wrote back to a convicted serial killer known as the Happy Face Killer. I've also done a video on that if you want to check it out on the playlist. And he asked him if he gets real butter on his bread. And the Happy Face Killer literally replied to him at some point and said, please just own up to it. Like, own up to what you've done. It's better, But it doesn't sound like Rex Heuermann is doing that. He's not following his friend's advice because he's there in court as of yesterday saying, Your Honor, I am not guilty of any of these crimes that you are charging me with. Exhibit B. Yeah, here's Exhibit B. We've already gone through this before in great detail, so check that out on the playlist. This is the HK 2002-04 planning document, all the things that he had written. Of course, we saw it above as well, where they highlighted some of it. Here as well, he literally said pre-prep, prep, and post-event. Destroy file. Some people have speculated he may have misspelt this on purpose in case he ever gets caught. Then he can say, well, I don't write like that and I don't spell like that. But I don't know if that's going to work. So here again, notes and recon reports and body prep. It says dispose of the following. So yes, you can either pause to read or you can go check out the video where we went through all of this already one by one. This whole things to remember thing. Wow. This is about a lot of people yesterday at the live stream were asking what's the significance of the push pins because media had asked about that. And here they say, use push pins to hang drop clothes. So I guess cloths from the ceiling, not tape. And they found evidence of him having used push pins. So it's almost like he made a Dexter serial killer room with either cloth or plastic or something like that, which is just really scary. I really feel for all the victims that encountered this alleged serial killer, Rex Heuermann, because it sounds like not only was he into a lot of torture, sometimes they say he may have kept the victims for days. Just the way that they were picked up, things that allegedly happened to them, and then the way that they were discarded is just absolutely nightmarish. It really sometimes does sound like a movie because there are movies about serial killers and things like this, but they're real. They're in plain sight. They're not like hunchback, like heaving monsters. They're in plain sight. An architect working on 5th Avenue, New York. Living in Massapequa Park part of the community for his whole life. He was living in his childhood home at the time. Married, 2 kids, in plain sight. Oh my goodness. So, thank you so much for, if you made it to the end, well done. Thank you so much for listening to all of this. I'm glad that you want to learn all the information. There's, of course, always more to learn with this. I will keep you posted on any other developments. And if you haven't yet, do check out the playlist because there's lots of information on there that you might want to check out. We even I fired up the Microsoft Flight Simulator and we flew the route so that we could just see what it looks like, you know, from an aerial perspective, especially that Ocean Parkway. But of course, the flight sim had street lights on that road already, which it didn't in the past when Rex Heuermann allegedly was driving up and down there, dropping off human remains. If you are watching this at the time that I am posting this, then I would like to wish you a wonderful festive season, a very Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. I'm looking forward to, I'll be here most days in December in any case. And also, I'm looking forward to 2025 with you. Thank you so much for all your support. We are currently at this point at, let me tell you, 381,278 Grizzlies in this community. I'm so proud of this community. Thank you so much for choosing to subscribe to the channel. And also, thank you so much to all the patrons. If you haven't made it over to Patreon yet, go check it out. And all the members who support the work that I do. There is no way, with how censored YouTube is and just how everything works, that I would be able to do this full time without the support of the Grizzly patrons and the Grizzly members. So thank you so, so much. All right, everyone, I will see you in the next one. Till then, stay safe.